Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, filling in for Alex. I'm going to be joined later in the show with Alex and with Anthony Gucciardi, and we're going to be talking about Obama as dictator. That's increasingly how he's being seen in Washington, and it's much more than just partisan politics. There's some real substance to this. There's a real departure from the rule of law, and there's a tremendous concentration of power, and we see an exponential rise in the number of executive orders. So we're going to be talking about that in the third hour with Alex and Anthony Gucciardi. And we're going to be joined in the next hour with Leanne McAdoo and Gigi Arnetta, also on the staff of the Nightly News. That's where you'll normally find me. We have Prison Planet TV. This is a good time of the year to sign up for Prison Planet TV and support that. Every night through the week, we have a news broadcast there. It's something that you can share with friends and family. Up to 10 people can listen to that at the same time, and it helps to support our operation. That's what funds it. It's a great way to get the word out, and you'll find on Prison Planet TV, as a subscriber, you'll have access in HD quality to all of Alex's documentaries that he produces are there. So it's a great way to wake people up. It's something that you can pass around as a gift this time of year. Now, also, I want to let you know that we have Survival Shield is now back in stock. That's the nascent iodine. You may not realize that it used to be 40 years ago that people got at least 725 micrograms of iodine on average a day just through baked goods, because they used to use iodine in the processing of baked goods. They took that out. And you know what they did? They substituted it with bromides, which are harmful to your health. So there's a deficiency for most people. Unless you eat a lot of seaweed, a lot of seafood, you don't get very much iodine. It's essential for brain health. A lot of people in the office who take this can actually feel the effect, feel it in their pineal gland. I don't get any feel out of coffee, though. So I'm not typical of most people. I can have multiple canisters of coffee and I don't feel it. But I know the importance of iodine. And just like any other supplement, I know that I'm not getting, as something that I need to supplement my diet with, I'm not getting enough of it in my regular diet. The American diet has changed quite a bit in the last several decades. And if you're aware of what's going on with it, you're aware of your need to supplement. You can pick that up right now. It helps also to support our operation. It's an important thing. It's InfoWarsLife.com. You can find our health products that are being developed there, as well as ProPure Filter is now still has a 20% discount on it at Water 20. I think you can still get that offer. That's on the website there at InfoWarsStore.com. Now, we were talking just before the break about the effect of minimum wage. And, of course, it's a very important thing because, according to statistics, 70% more college grads are earning minimum wage than a decade ago. And the U.S. economy, even though it's recovered 5.7 million jobs out of the 8.7 million jobs that were lost, 60% of all those jobs have been at the low-income wage. So if people lose a high-paying job in a factory, and they now get another job at a low-paying fast food industry, as far as the government's concerned, that's not a problem because we're just looking at the jobs, right? But it is a big problem because we see our country being transformed from a manufacturing society to a service economy. And we were told for a long time that was going to be great because we weren't going to have the pollution issues. We're going to push those off onto China and the third world. And of course, we see that they have tremendous pollution there because there's no laws protecting the people who live there. They've got them working in unbelievable slave conditions. But that's exactly what they wanted. They took our high-paying manufacturing jobs that gave us kind of a self-sufficiency in our economy, exported them, and they're going to be doing that in spades with the Trans-Pacific Partnership. But don't pay attention to that. Let's focus on the minimum wage because Obama's going to help you there. We're going to be right back, and we're talking about that a little bit more in detail with callers. Stay tuned. Now you can watch the InfoWars Nightly News streaming live as it happens for free.
Check it out at InfoWars.com/show.
Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight filling in for Alex. I'm going to be joined at the bottom of the hour with Leanne McAdoo and Gigi Arnetta. We're going to be talking about the police state. And we just had this article that I mentioned about a 14-year-old boy being tasered in the face while handcuffed by police. His crime? $31.93 shoplifted from Walmart. I mean, we're getting into the territory of Les Miserables. You know, taking people. We had a guy arrested by the school because he hooked up his electric car without asking anybody and got 5 cents worth of electricity. So they arrested him. The police state is out of control in America. And we can't just look at these superficial aspects of it, the brutality that we see of it, or children getting tasered in the face instead of being talked to or chased down or whatever. We've got to look at what's underneath this. And part of what's underneath this, of course, is the money that is being made out of the prison industrial complex. We all know that there was a massive prison program that was built up in the wake of Reagan's war on drugs. As he shifted from going after the suppliers to the end users, as his Attorney General Ed Meese put in the mandatory minimums, they started locking so many people up. And with the mandatory minimums, judges had no discretion as to who they could let out. So they were letting out violent criminals so they could keep people who were peaceful marijuana users who were growing marijuana in their closet, not doing anything to anybody outside of their own little world where they're operating, locking these people up for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years with mandatory minimums based on the quantity of marijuana that they discovered in their houses. So they went on this massive prison building program. And, of course, the prison bed guarantees we see in many cases has been reported on by, if you will, mainstream media even talks about this. Huffington Post, 70% occupancy guarantees in California. Many other contracts with private prison companies have language that mandates that they get at least a 90% prison beds be filled. And so when those things are not filled, of course, they get to take that money out on the states. They have to make those guarantees. So there's a massive incentive to put people in prison. So just like we were talking about before, if Jeremy Scahill goes out and does a documentary on the dirty war, and he talks about the death and the suffering of our foreign policy, but he ignores the root cause of it, the profits behind it. He ignores that the CIA is getting record high profits from the drug trade in Afghanistan. Hit a new record this year, 2013, a bumper crop of opium products for heroin. So if they ignore that sort of thing, if they ignore what's really driving that, if we ignore the fact that we have these private prisons that are demanding that people be locked up for nonsense, we're going to continue to see 14-year-olds tasered in the face. We're going to continue to see people thrown in jail for, quote unquote, stealing 5 cents worth of electricity. It's absolutely amazing. But of course, people are not looking at what's behind things. That's what we've been talking about with the minimum wage. It's nothing but a head fake. And we've been taking some of your calls on that. Real quickly, let's go to Frank in Michigan. He's been holding for a while. Frank?
Greetings and salutations, David. It's an honor to speak to you today.
Thank you. Thank you for calling. What's on your mind?
You were talking about the police state, and, real quick here, I was in federal prison. I'm not a horrible person. I was actually a member of the Michigan militia when Oklahoma happened. They raided my house and found a .22 rifle locked up in my gun cabinet, and I had to do federal prison time. I lost all my gun rights, and it was really all technicality stuff. But anyway, in federal prison, they have a faction called Unicorn. And there is an army of prisoners building stuff, signs, all for local municipalities and all this stuff. So there is a gigantic profiteering going on in the prison system.
Yes.
I was locked up with guys who were 70 years old getting 10 years for pulling in a ton too many eel off the, out of Watertown, New York, out of the bay there. Stuff like that. And us as listeners, as citizens of the United States of America, we have this information. And and I know, we go out there and we try to tell people stuff, and they look at us like poops. So a lot of the listeners and a lot of the people who are involved in the resistance here, it's alive and well here in Michigan. A lot of liberty lovers.
Well, thanks for letting us know.
Away from telling other people. We got to tell people. We can't be scared. We
got a hard break. Hang on, Frank. We'll be right back.
Many anthropologists and archaeologists believe that before man even discovered the power to harness and use fire, we were involved in agrarian activities. That is, taking the seeds of plants and then replanting them to produce more. The very foundation of our modern civilization and human culture is centered around the planting and cultivation of edible plants.
Here are some of the amazing deals at InfoWars Seed Center at InfoWarsShop.com.
The Survival Seed Vault by My Patriot Supply features only the finest survival heirloom seeds for a robust and hardy garden, even in the toughest times. We also have starter varieties of the deluxe seed packages for fruit, salad, salsa, peppers, medical herbs, and more.
Go to the InfoWars Seed Center at InfoWarsShop.com.
And remember, the revolution against tyranny is growing. Many anthropologists.
Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight filling in for Alex, and as we hear the Empire Strikes Back, one of our top stories that's on Drudge today is the Chinese state media is bragging of plans to establish a Death Star moon base. We can't make this stuff up, folks. We don't need to anyway. Under the headline, PLA dreams of turning the moon into a Death Star. This is a quote from the Chinese officials. They say the moon could be transformed into a deadly weapon like the Death Star in Star Wars. Things just get more and more bizarre. But I wanted to keep Frank from Michigan on the line. We just took his call in the last segment. I know a lot of people are getting a news segment in the first 5 minutes. And Frank was telling us about his experience in prison and how they were using prisons for slave labor. Now, that's nothing new to our listeners. Alex has talked about that many times, but I wanted people to hear somebody who's actually been there and done that and seen it. Frank, what were they building at the prison where you were working? And tell us a little bit about what kind of wages people were getting paid there.
They were getting paid, the top wage was 25 cents an hour, and that was at McKean Federal Prison in Pennsylvania. And they had us making furniture, stop signs. This is a giant industry. They have a welding shop. They have a metal manufacturing shop. And each federal prison has a Unicor, and that's the name of the segment of the prison that they have you doing this for. And it's a huge industry. It is absolutely unbelievable, and it is slave labor. And, that was years ago. It's been 15 years now. And now when we talk about FEMA camps and the such and the setting up of things like that,
yes,
if you look at a minimum security federal prison, you're looking at a FEMA camp in my mind. I mean, it was an unbelievable industry.
Yeah. And paying people 25 cents an hour. So there you go. I mean, we want to talk about minimum wage, but let's take a look at this prison thing. Now, according to this article here from Huffington Post, now they do put out some of the facts correctly. They say that there is a prison bed guarantees that range between minimums of 70% and going up to 90%. So that's a guarantee. And if they don't fill the prisons, then the private prisons will charge the state. And they sum this up by saying such requirements create an incentive for policymakers to focus on filling empty prison beds. Of course, it's about money. See, it's about them not having to pay extra money to these private prisons, although they're paying them a lot per prisoner. And then the prisons, the Unicor, as Frank just mentioned, is paying the prisoners 25 cents an hour to work as slave wages. And we like to think about the fact that we've got better working conditions here. We've got a minimum wage, and we're somehow maybe better off than the people who are in Foxconn. But look at the prisons. We've got prison labor. We've got slave labor in the U.S. And this is how they break, even though they give you the facts in the Huffington Post article, they break this down. They say private prison corporations emerged in the 1980s and 90s at a time when crime rates were soaring and states were scrambling to keep up with surging prison populations. I'm sorry. It wasn't that the crime rates were soaring. It wasn't that we were facing dangerous crime. The crime rates are soaring because they redefined what crimes were. They took victimless crimes, like people growing marijuana in their closet, and they made that a mandatory minimum, which meant that things that you and I would think of as real crime, like people who were rapists or violent criminals, would be turned out into the street so they could lock up these people who were passively growing marijuana in their closet. That was what the quote-unquote crime rates were soaring in the 1980s and 1990s. I'm surprised they wouldn't point that out. This is Chris Kirkham, and this was back in September this year when we did this article. But that's exactly what Frank is talking about, how we've got prison labor here, and nobody sees that. There's very few stories that are done on that by the mainstream media. Of course, everybody's going to be talking about Obama's compassion for the poor, the working poor, and how he's going to raise minimum wages, but they don't talk about the reality of what's hidden in this country. Aaron in Nevada, what have you, are you there? Oh, he did. Okay. Let's go to, let's see, what's our next person here? I'm going to get my glasses on. Mark in Texas. Hey, Mark, are you there?
Yeah, hi, David.
What's on your mind?
A couple of things. First of all, about as far as the police state goes, one thing I think we should really start doing is we start to cut drastically cut the police forces in this country and start replacing them with volunteers and, people doing kind of like a jury duty type of deal, and, and maybe reserves and all that, and start taking away some of that power. For one thing, why does a police officer, especially in Texas, where pretty much the population is armed, prepared to defend themselves, why do you need police officers to have off-duty authority? They don't need it. They shouldn't have it. It actually takes away from the, we're equal under the law. There's no need for it. And as far as states like New York or maybe New Jersey and a lot of California now, people got to demand their Second Amendment rights, and then they won't have to count on such large police forces and powerful police forces in the first place.
Well, I agree, but that's something that's very different than what the federal government wants, because the federal government is pushing this buildup. They're pushing the fusion centers. They're pushing the militarization of the police, bringing the weapon systems and the vehicles that we've used against urban populations in Iraq and Afghanistan, bringing those home and encouraging the police to not only hire more police, but even more troubling is the mindset that they're encouraging in the police. And this is very much visible when the InfoWars crew went with Alex up to Dallas at the protest of the shutting down of the First Amendment around the JFK assassination up there. You could see the attitude of the police there, and you could see that these police who came out and immediately started shoving and punching people without giving them any warning after the other police had let them into the area and they were waiting to proceed to the next checkpoint. These cops come out of the Homeland Security van that was there. You can see it in the video. They come out of there. So these are the Dallas sheriffs who are coming out of Homeland Security. It's a perfect metaphor for what we see happening in reality throughout the country, and that is the federal government changing their rules of engagement, if you will, with the civilians. We can even talk about it in that respect. They call people civilians as if they're military. Everything that they do is on a military model. So let's go to Howie in Pennsylvania. Howie?
Hey, buddy, how you doing?
Doing good. How you doing, Howie?
I gotta tell you, everybody loves when you host the show, man. But man, I gotta tell you something. I watched a VH1 special. It was called "The Fabulous Life of Billionaires." My God, it made me sick to my stomach, man.
Yeah, we
really are screwed. I mean, with the mega yachts and the huge palaces and everything. I mean, they are dug in. I mean, there's no way to remove them. I mean, some of them, they're mega yachts. They got their own submarines and bulletproof windows and anti-missile defenses on it and everything. I mean, what do you do, man?
Well, when I look at these protests in the Ukraine, and there's an article on InfoWars, mass unrest in Ukraine amid supposed tug-of-war between the EU and Russia. Now, when you look at these videos of what's happening with the police protests, what I was pretty amazed to see was a massive, massive group of protesters coming up to a police barricade, a police line, and they had some concrete barricades there. And the protesters had a bulldozer. And they were very slowly, it wasn't a violent attack on the police, but they were very slowly pushing the police and pushing the barricades back, and the police were restrained by that. Now, is it because the police are just good guys? I mean, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, they'd just be shooting everybody in sight if this was America. They would be handling it. The American government in a situation like that would react the same way that the Chinese government did in Tiananmen Square, in my opinion. I think we've gotten to that point in the United States now. But when you see a massive group of people like that, and I can't say that under all circumstances, because when we went down to the protest in the Alamo, when we had about 1,000 people down there with rifles slung over their shoulders, even though most of those rifles, if not all those rifles, were unloaded, the police kept their distance. And they just watched to make sure that nothing was going to happen. So they didn't get in anybody's face. They didn't harm anybody down there until most of the people were left. And then the last few people that were there, the police came up to them and started harassing them, which is why we had that rally there in the first place. That's why Texas Open Carry sponsored that rally along with other groups, was because when people are by themselves, the police, because there's so many of them and because they feel empowered, they will threaten people's basic fundamentals and fundamental liberties and their rights. But when you have a massive group of people, just like we saw in the Ukraine, the police will keep their distance in most cases. And we need to educate the police. That's why it's a very important project that the Oath Keepers have to educate the police, to educate the military so that there isn't some kind of a violent confrontation. You know, things were brought down peacefully in East Germany when the police there decided that they weren't going to shoot people who were crossing over the arbitrary fence between East and West Berlin. That was the beginning of the end of that tyranny there with the Stasi. And we can end it here in America if people will stand together and stand up to this. But the first thing is people have to understand that there is an issue. And right now, I just don't see that happening. Most people are not really aware of this except in isolated incidents, like this 14-year-old who was tasered in the face. We're going to be talking to Gigi Arnetta and Leanne McAdoo at the bottom of the hour about this. But let's go to Bob in Florida. Bob? Hey, Bob?
Yes, hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, sorry about that.
That's all
I have
right.
some information for you. I'm in the healthcare industry. I'm a healthcare vendor, and there's a company called RepTrax, which is the top vendor credentialing company that's installed in 5,000 hospitals and has 400,000 registered users across the country.
Mm-hmm.
And this company is owned by a Chinese security company called BTC Electronics Corporation. And they make all sorts of security equipment, video cameras, surveillance equipment, and they're in all the hospitals. They require all vendors to provide some of their medical records, require vaccinations, and they're essentially tracking all vendors coming in and outside the hospitals.
Hello, this is Hank Hill, and I'm telling you what, you need to listen to Alex Jones.
Yeah. Infowars.com.
I judge, what is the secret of the universe?
Infowars.com.
Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight filling in for Alex, and we're taking your calls in this segment. Now, in the next segment, we're going to be joined with Gigi Arnetta and with Leanne McAdoo, and they're going to talk about the burgeoning police state, and we're going to see how that is developing in different parts of the world. We see that there's massive demonstrations in the Ukraine, and the police there back down. We can see what can happen if there's enough people that get together. We see the same thing essentially happening in Thailand. In Thailand, they were told that they had a bulldozer just like the people in the Ukraine, and they were told that if they used that bulldozer, the police were going to shoot to kill. Now it appears that they've had second thoughts, and that government has blinked and backed down. There is strength in numbers. We've seen it in our protests. We've seen where in the protests in Dallas, they shut down a free speech around the JFK commemoration. We saw that the police moved on people, the police that were being backed by Homeland Security and the feds, moved on the crowd when it was at its smallest, in the rain and in the cold, and after people had been there for quite some time. We saw that happen at the Alamo in San Antonio. They didn't move against 1,000 people carrying rifles, but when you just had a few straggling around there, they no longer respected their right to open carry, which is a legal right here in Texas. Now, Alex is also going to be joining us, and along with Anthony Gucciardi, and we're going to be talking about the developing problems with Obama. Not that it's anything necessarily new, but what's new is the rhetoric that we're seeing from representatives. We're seeing it from think tanks. We had Michael Cannon with the Cato Institute talking about the fact that if Obama keeps ignoring the laws, that could cause a violent revolution. We see a law professor from George Washington University, Jonathan Turley, a very respected law professor, saying that the danger is quite severe from Obama. The problem that we have with the president is that he's not simply posing a danger to the Constitution, he's becoming the very danger the Constitution was designed to avoid. That's very strong language. We see an article on Infowars.com where a congressman is warning that he fears that Obama could suspend the election laws. And he says, well, if he can suspend the laws on immigration and nationalization, if he can arbitrarily invade another country, if he can do all these things as if he was a dictator, not under the rule of law, not checked by any of the branches of Congress, not under the Constitution, then why not allow him to, he certainly could possibly suspend the election laws and just make himself a perpetual dictator. But in this segment, I want to take your calls. We've been talking about a lot of things. We've been talking about the minimum wage increase that Obama is putting out there, which I think is really truly a head fake if you want to ignore everything else that's happening in the economy, the secretive Trans-Pacific Partnership trade agreement that he's negotiating. But let's take some of your calls here. We've got David in Kentucky. David, what's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, David?
Doing good.
Well, yesterday I was on my way to work. Me and my fiance work together, and we're about to drop we live in Indiana, and we crossed the bridge to get into Kentucky, and the police followed us for about 2 miles or so. My vehicle is a New Mexico vehicle. It belongs to my father, and the cops.
I'm sorry, Dave, I'm sorry. I'd really like to hear your story, but the phone is breaking up on you. Let's go to David in Texas. David?
Yes, how you doing?
Doing good.
I was with you guys Wednesday night and Thursday night. I didn't make it Friday because of the weather, but I was listening live. And when that melee began, and and Alex was talking about watching one of them push down a man with a little girl on his shoulders, and I remember that kid. She was about 8 or 9 years old.
Wow.
And what really troubled me the most, and it was probably my biggest fear, was the possibility that someone careless, whichever side, would have fired one shot. I think that they would have mowed you guys down.
Yeah. That's the concern, is that things can get out of hand. And it's just as you pointed out, it's just the confrontational attitude of the police. Is that coming up after one group of police had let everybody, the demonstrators who were conducting themselves peacefully and within these unconstitutional guidelines that the city of Dallas had put on free speech. So they were following all the rules. They weren't getting confrontational there. They were showing up to demonstrate, to point out the fact that the First Amendment was being stopped. But you had this group just come up and start pushing and punching without any warning. And that's what we see over and over again. We see the police doing that with tasers. We see them doing that down in Bastrop, where they tasered that 17-year-old child and he hit his head on the concrete in a coma, possibly life-threatening. I'm not sure how that was resolved. That was about a week and a half ago that happened. But it's amazing to see that. We're going to be talking about that very thing in the next segment with Leanne McAdoo and Gigi Arnetta. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we're going to talk about the abuse of police power and what we can do to bring it in and how it's different in other countries, because there are other countries where that doesn't happen. It doesn't have to happen here. And we need to make sure that something is done about it. We'll be right back with Gigi Arnetta and Leanne McAdoo. Stay tuned. Now you can watch the InfoWars Nightly News streaming live as it happens for free.
Check it out at Infowars.com/show.